Beacon. I'll start entering those into Streetmix. Sidewalk, 10 feet. There's no tree. There's no bus stop. There is one at Jefferson and Charles, but there is a drive lane. So I'll pull that in. I'll remove that no turn lane. That drive lane is going east. It is 15 feet wide. See what I'm doing? I'm getting in here the different types of parking, the different types of drive lanes. There is a diagonal parking here somewhere in this lower bar. There. Okay. Remove. Angled parking segment is 17 feet wide, so I entered that in. Come on. And see all these different options for angled parking. These are arrows that help indicate the angle that the car enters it and whether it's on the left or the right of the drive lane. So then I just push that up to 17 feet because angled parking takes a lot of space. There is no planter. There's no bike lane. There is some fun stuff built in there, yes, there is. There's no trees. Sidewalk, I've got 12 feet of sidewalk. You can see if you have a light though, if you have a street lamp, you want to include that into your total sidewalk width, not on its own, otherwise it won't fit. And then, so what I would adjust here, if there's a sidewalk lamp, which there is there lighting here? There is one street lamp on the corner. Okay, so that's right. I'll move, so I can move, I'll take the lamp and move that over. So he's actually over here. So this portion of the sidewalk gets reduced to 8 feet. Sidewalk lamp is in fact a Cobra head lamp and it's facing to the right. See that Cobra head lamp? We call them Cobra heads in Chicago. There's the historic street lamp. You can put a pride flag on it. You can, but the Cobra head is the infamous snakehead lamp. And that segment can be reduced down to 1 feet. And this sidewalk can be reduced down to 9. So if I have total sidewalk with the lamp, what I'll do is I'll just add them together right here. It's 9 plus 1. That makes sense? Clear as mud? Okay. And as you increase the sidewalk width, Streetmix will add more people to it. Or less, or more. This is a surface lot for me. It's not a waterfront. It's not fenced. It is a surface lot. There's this little gap in here. It's annoying me. I have to figure that out. And Fickle Peach here is going to be 3 floors, or is it 4? I've got a little bit of flex space here. So you can see I've got a little bit of, I got 1 feet on this side and 1 feet on this side. So I may have, my measurements might be a little bit off. Looks like I've got 2 foot of room. So I will just add that on to the street lamp, I think. Bump that up to 2 feet. And then bump this one up. There's a little bit of flex space here in front of the Peach between its lot line and the building, so I'll just bump this up to 13 feet, and now I am within budget. Okay. This now is a simple Streetmix graphic representation of what this segment of Charles Street, this 100 block of Charles Street is currently doing in its existing conditions. It will give you a rough number of how many people it can accommodate per hour. Drive lane, 1,500 people per hour. With 2 wide sidewalks, you can accommodate almost 40,000 people per hour, supposedly. There aren't that many people in Delaware County that would occupy this street that would give us that capacity, but Streetmix does give you rough numbers in terms of how many people it can move with the modes of traffic that you program into the model. So I will now save this. Settings. So just let's check our settings, metric versus Imperial, English versus other languages. Share. I'm going to save this as an image. So you can tweet this, you can share it on Facebook. I'm going to save this as an image. This is critical, so do pay attention here. Save as image. You can toggle off segment names and widths, yes or no if you want those. You can toggle the street name on or off for this image. You can toggle off that cartoon sky. So it will give you a transparent sky that you can place on a PowerPoint background or a PowerPoint slide or on a color or a gradient. So those are all choices you can make here. Save that to your computer, and now that image is ready for use elsewhere. Or you can, if you're building a PowerPoint for somebody, this is how you do it. You save these different segments and then save them as images, and you can start putting a presentation together quickly.
How to get rid of the empty spaces?
Say again?
Like empty spaces.
Empty spaces?
Yeah.
Clang. I'll stop the recording. Existing street and renamed it proposed. That if I have a Streetmix account, then it is saved to my account. Any one of these can be made a copy and used as a baseline reference. So I'm continuing with the 56-foot width. It's roughly 39,500 people per hour. I've given it a location. So now we can start thinking about maybe some infill on the surface lot across the street from the Fickle Peach. We have this much width now in which we can start playing with this. So we could start swapping out some of the lighting. If we want to rethink angled parking, that's something we can start to think about here. Parallel parking, by switching it to parallel parking, you just switch it out like that. And if you switch out to parallel parking, you discover how much extra space that actually was taking up. People do like diagonal parking, but because it gets more cars per 100 feet, but is a lot of space that ends up being used. And so if we come down to our menu here and we start grabbing the parklet, shove that in, Streetmix will make the buildings pink and say, there's not enough width for all of this. But if you change out the angled parking into parallel parking, there is adequate segment width. So I just bring that down now, just making that change from angled parking to the parking lane. The buildings will go from pink back into their representative color. And if I can make that now, if I make the parking lane too narrow, Streetmix will give you a little bit of a warning that this segment may not be wide enough. So if I can squeeze in a 7-foot parking lane next to this 15-foot drive lane, that's something. I can also start reducing the width of the drive lane. And once you make it too narrow, Streetmix will give you another warning and say that a 7-foot drive lane might not be wide enough. Drive lanes are directly proportional to the speeds that they accommodate. The wider the drive lane, the faster your public will want to drive. Yes, no, yes, no. So a comfortable width rule of thumb is roughly 12 feet. And even then, Streetmix is saying this segment may be too wide. If I bring it down to 11 or so, you'll see how much space I have to work with. Do I need all this sidewalk, or can I accommodate some other things with it? Those kinds of questions now. Can the parklet go on this side of the sidewalk or the other side? Those kinds of questions. Can we fit in a bike lane or a share or a bike share station? Maybe, maybe not. Those kinds of questions. So the menu down here has all these different things that you can include. Waiting area for a bus, those sorts of things. Temporary barrier, Jersey barrier, a buffer. If we wanted to create a landscape buffer between the parklet and the parking lane, that can be adjusted. We can also swap that out with a tree, starting to get that kind of separation. And again, does the tree go on the side of the parklet and the sidewalk or not? Do we bring in another tree here, reduce that sidewalk down to about 2 feet? Again, if you don't want to choke out a tree, tree needs nutrition, it needs water, so you do want to be careful. I was in a town in New Zealand 20 years ago that put asphalt right up to the trunks of the trees, and then a year later they wondered why all their trees were dead. I mean, trees need grates because the root ball needs to receive nutrition and minerals. It also needs aeration. So if you put asphalt right up to the trunk of a tree and wonder what it's doing, common sense, but it's only common sense if it's common. At any rate, these are already magnificent changes to the street if implemented, right? We're already getting significant different levels of shade and things like that. Now, in New York City, in portions of New York, you'll notice there's a little bit of a logic to street trees and whether or not they're implemented. In New York, most of the street trees are planted on east-west streets, right, as opposed to north-south streets. At least you're going through Manhattan and Chelsea, things like that. Because the sun is primarily from the south, and so the trees provide a shading element to the street. On north-south streets, not every street needs trees because the buildings themselves are actually casting shade onto the street. That doesn't mean that that's mutually exclusive. State Street in Chicago is a wonderful north-south street that has trees on both sides. So some of the logic behind this, in terms of what a tree can do in terms of shading element, helps us. Is helpful to know, remember where the sun is exactly. But in any case, a street tree provides a formal element. It provides a scaling element. You can see already from Streetmix that this is starting to introduce more human scale spaces in the valley of the street. It's providing some elements of privacy in terms of a screen looking up into the buildings and in terms of a screen looking down. All these different things. There just aren't enough trees in downtown Muncie. I don't think you could plant enough. But the prejudice against trees comes from a period of history in the 1980s and 90s when all of the trees in downtown were attracting pigeons, and so there's still some folks that remember that and associate street trees attracting pigeons and the effluent that was associated with that population. So at any rate, trees help with wind, they help with shade, they help with property value, they help with lots of different things. So I don't think there could be enough, honestly. So that said, I will continue to add this, but you can adjust the size of the planter, you know, roughly 2 feet for that sidewalk. Of course, it adds to your total sidewalk width on that side. You can you can see that even though I've done all of this, I still have room, right? I still have a couple of feet left in which I could wiggle in something else, get in a street lamp. That's not the most attractive street lamp, but they do have that one. It's hiding behind the tree now. There are other vehicular segments. There's a magic carpet, as some of you found out. That's just fun, I guess. It's a reference to Steppenwolf, I guess. Yeah, there's Aladdin and Jasmine. So this starts to give us a possibility for the proposal. It gives you a very fast sketch idea in terms of what can be proposed there. Okay, so go ahead and save that. To save it, once again, I will go to Share. It'll already save it to your account. Save as image. I'll include segment names and widths. I'll include the street name. I'll choose a transparent sky as opposed to that blue cartoony thing. The street name might be too big, so you may choose to click that off and just change the file name. But I will then save that to my computer. And that will give you a portable network graphic or a PNG that you can insert into a SketchUp model, a PowerPoint slide, or otherwise. Now, if we go to Cad Mapper, and I recommend you sign in with an EDU account when you make a Cad Mapper account. Cad Mapper is a service that provides free SketchUp models, free Rhino models, free AutoCAD drawings, free Illustrator drawings, based on criteria that you input into the model. So we need to carefully consider that criteria when we enter it because it affects how the model looks when we download it. Its reference is not Beacon, it's not Google, it is OpenStreetMap. So it is referencing the OpenStreetMap directory, which is a wiki community. It is a community of cartographers who voluntarily draw their cities. So they enter information into the map of where parks are, where buildings are, building footprints and things like that. All the building footprints that you see in downtown Muncie were built by Andy Shears. He is the owner of Muncie Map Company, which is a business downtown that makes and sells fun Muncie gifts, as well as map-related gifts and historic maps and things like that. He also has a mapping business, so if someone does need custom cartography for a report or for a comprehensive plan, he does that. He also restores historic maps for framed art. So he's doing a restoration right now of one of the 1886 or 1888 historic bird's eye views of Greencastle. He's also restored different Muncie maps, trying to make a living doing all these different types of businesses. You actually met Andy. He was walking his dog during our Charles Street walk. So Andy's a Reds fan. So, but he sat down and did all the building footprints. Before he did that, there were no Muncie footprints. So these building footprints now have a little bit of data attached to them in terms of their building height and stuff like that. So with an EDU account in Cad Mapper, you may download up to 1 square kilometer, up to 1 square kilometer of city. This is helpful if you're doing a mapping diagram or a figure ground diagram or any one of these things because they can be exported directly to Illustrator or to SketchUp. But this can be a pretty powerful tool if used properly. There are some caveats. One is the free file can not exceed 1 square kilometer. Anything bigger than that, there is a charge associated with it in euros. And we can zoom in pretty far. So if we get in to say about here, we can't zoom in infinitely far. Wouldn't make sense, but I can get a segment here between Walnut and Mulberry. That probably would look okay, just in terms of the segment I'm interested in. You can see you can make a narrow box like this up to about there, and you can get a pretty good street segment going. I might expand this area just so it includes a couple of building footprints. I also want to be able to see the park. So I'll just kind of wiggle that in between buildings. You can see the Muncie grid is slightly off. Was that 1.5, 2 degrees? 3D buildings, if available, those 3D buildings are available. So you set a false height if no 3D data. It defaults to 8 meters. How long is a meter roughly? 3 feet. So 8 times 3, 24 feet. That's roughly a 2-story building. How tall is a story? Depends. The answer is, it depends. How tall is a building story? Well, what is a building story? A building story refers to occupiable floor. Well, the first floor might be 18 feet, the upper floor might be 10 feet, might be 12 feet, the next upper floor might be 10 or 11 feet. So building story has no set number to it. It depends. All right, so, but 24 feet would represent a 2-story building if we didn't have building data. That means if the building footprint has been drawn and no height has been attributed to it by the map maker, it will default to 24 feet. Yes? Okay. Topography, contours every 4 meters. You can click that off if you want a flat map. In Muncie, a flat map will work. If you're working in downtown Anderson or on the edge of the river in Indy, you want some topography because that will show you in the model the curvature of the earth as it terraces down to the river level. If we were working in Pittsburgh right now, your building site would be on an incline, so, or Cincinnati or the like. You then have to tell it road geometry. What do you want from the model? Do you want just center lines? Do you want outlines? Or do you want a mesh surface? Please download a couple of different maps and see what that means, okay? Because these have very different aspects in terms of whether or not you download this as an Illustrator file or a SketchUp file. Very different aspects. So I encourage you to download models that have all three, just so you understand what they are. Centerline is just if you are locating the center line and then you want to start building a street off of that. An outline, you will then set the width of that outline or that mesh based on these measurements: highways, major roads, minor roads, and paths. So these can be adjusted here. Again, it's all in metric. So you have to make a foot to metric conversion and then enter what the default would be for your area. As you can see, it is reading some streets as minor and some streets as major. I'll leave these as default for the moment, but just know that these can be adjusted and entered in as metric. But do check out what these three things mean: just the center line, just the outline, or just a mesh surface. And then hit create file. So that is creating an Illustrator file, which then we can populate in Illustrator, and it looks something like that. Okay? So all of these are going to be shapes that you can click on in Illustrator and make a different color. So that's kind of cool. Okay? So for mapping and for diagramming, that's another tool in your tool belt. But for 3D, I'm going to select a SketchUp file. And it'll give us a SketchUp 8 to 2014, which will be fine. I will zoom back in to my chosen area. So this is pretty exciting because it makes Illustrator files and CAD files and SketchUp files. Again, I just want to jiggle this in here and get a couple of buildings that we can look at. SketchUp, no topography, 3D build, yeah, all that stuff. I'm going to pick outlines for this example and then create file. It'll give you a preview.
So you want us to say the SketchUp file? Not the
Yes,
Illustrator file?
yeah. There's a preview of what the model will look like. And then download it.
Was that the SketchUp 2015 or 14?
Do you have a, oh, yes, good question. Yeah, you could do 2015 plus, yeah. You can, yeah, you have SketchUp Pro 2019 loaded on these. And if you want a free version of SketchUp, you can download the 2017 version to your personal computer for free. There isn't much difference between the versions, I don't think, but
If the buildings don't appear in 3D, well, some of them do and some of them don't, is that a challenge for us then?
if they don't, set a false height right here. You can set a false height. If the building has a footprint, you can set the false height. Okay, it'd either be 3 meters or 4 meters or 8 meters in this case. So it's going to give a default of 24 feet or 8 meters for that false height, if it has a footprint at all. Not all of Muncie is covered by this. Andy has only built downtown, so I was sharing, the building site my sophomores have is not covered by this map. So they were overjoyed that they could get the road structure of their site, but none of the buildings were built because, well, it takes time and people just kind of volunteer for this thing. So download that and then open it in SketchUp. And we'll take a look at it. Aha. Well then, see what it did there? It cut off the edge of the building. That's so cute. Okay. And see what it did there? It took the street widths and made them outlines. You may want that, you may not want that. The meshes provide a different type of modeling tool. The center lines just leave a center line. So depending on what kind of thing you want to move forward, that's the type of model that you can quickly download here. Now, in SketchUp, first thing, when you first open it, we've got to have some standard toolbars set up. So under View, Tool Palettes, Large Tool Set, make sure that that is open. Under View, Tool Palettes, Large Tool Set, it gives you this full tool set here on the left. Otherwise, you're only going to be able to see the tools that are located there. I then also I always open up layers, or what are now called tags. In 2019, they're called layers. In 2020, which I'm running, they're called tags. I don't know why. I think it has something to do with building information modeling, kind of might be a BIM thing. But if I open up Window, Layers, or Tags, you can see that this model has some things already set up on different layers, which we like, right? These things are now separate from each other, so we can't get them sticky or otherwise. You could even isolate the buildings and bring them into another model. I mean, there's some great stuff that comes in with this free model.
I don't think my computer likes me. Is everyone else getting that sounds like it's a read-only file? Every time I download it, it tells me, I don't know,
Model is in metric. Okay? Nothing would be that easy, right? Nothing would be that easy. So in Canvas, I have a link, how to convert a Cad Mapper SketchUp model to Imperial. So there is a link, and it is in the SketchUp forums. Okay? So we go to Window, Model Info, Units. If you have a SketchUp question, chances are it's been addressed in the forums. Huge number of users and enthusiasts who answer each other's questions and help them navigate this weird thing called SketchUp. So, so we have to go to Window, Model, Info, and then Units. So we go back to the model, Window, Window. So I always lose it. Model Info. And then we change it from units to architectural, and we get feet and inches instead of metric. Yes? Yes? No? Yes? No? See? No? Then save a copy as, and this will save our now converted, so I'm just going to call it existing Muncie 100 block East Charles. And so I can turn on and off all of this stuff here. And that's good because that way things don't stick to each other when we start working. And it tells us that when we start to work in a SketchUp model, we manage our work on different layers. You must manage your work in SketchUp on different layers. Okay? It's just like Shrek. An ogre has layers. But then we can fly around and take a look. What I do then is the orbit tool is the most used tool because you're orbiting around the model. Its origin point is set over here, and it's just the fastest way to navigate around. I'll get rid of this little guy. Anything selected in SketchUp from the left will select what's in the window. Anything selected from the right, anything that it touches. It's another SketchUp rule. Let's try it right now. Anything you select from the left will select something that's contained in the window. Anything selected from the right, it will select anything that it touches. See that difference? That's a SketchUp rule. I didn't make it, but it is a difference that's worth making. Because you're trying to select stuff in SketchUp, you want to select from the left, it'll select what's contained in the window. If you select from the right, it will select everything that it touches. I know, but that's something that's built into the program. All the tools here, if you just hover over them with your pointer, will tell you the name of the tool in terms of what it can do or what it does. There is a measuring tool. The model is scaled with some accuracy. Okay. Some accuracy, but it is pretty close. It's close enough for what we need it to do. So I'll zoom in. This is the Fickle Peach. You can see the turret there. These are based on building footprints that were built in OpenStreetMap, so they are not 100% accurate. And they are not necessarily square corners. This is just a faster way of getting to this portion of the assignment as opposed to building all this from scratch. We could have you do that, but the assignment would be 3 or 4 weeks long. I'm gonna grab a rectangle here and build a little rectangle and then use the push-pull tool and then pull it up. Whoop! Okay, so we've built a little bit of a barricade or a little bit of a billboard. So that's fun. And SketchUp is digital clay, is what I think one of my friends described it.
Wait, how do you do the pool?
So what I did was I made a little rectangle, clicked it, and it touched to there. And then there's the push-pull tool. It's also over here on the left toolbar. And you pull it up. Woo! Okay.
It's almost as fun as that game sounds.
Yes. Okay. All right, I will undo that because I need to remember I need to make a new layer and call it new stuff. Layer management is key in SketchUp. I need to make that the working layer. I do that by clicking it over here on the right. It looks like tags here because I'm running version 2020. Under version 2019, it's still called layers. But what I will do then is just I'm going to make a little bit of a billboard here on the end of the street. And then I'm going to pull that up like so and get it ready for an import. An import, you say? Yes, an import. So I'm going to open Photoshop. An import, you say? Let me undo that. I'm going to undo that because it needs to, our little rectangle here needs to accommodate from the corner of the building over. So it needs to actually be like this. So I'm still figuring this out myself because there's a lot of difference between version 2020. But what I've made is a little a rectangle that goes from the edge of the Fickle Peach over into this portion of the parking lot. So in Photoshop, I'm going to open the Streetmix image that I made. It's in my Downloads folder, yes. 100 block of East Charles Street PNG, open. And there it is, okay? So I don't need all of this, but I'm going to crop it down, grab the crop tool, and crop it down to the exact sidewalk width. Sidewalk width, sidewalk width. Just crop it down to that because I want this as a reference image in the SketchUp model. And then I will save that as a JPEG. SketchUp does not like PNGs. It just doesn't. So I need to save it, a copy of it, as a PNG. Sorry, as a JPEG. Ah! And a JPEG will not have the transparent background. Then I go back to SketchUp. I've got my billboard here going from the corner of the building into the sidewalk there. I'm going to go File, Import, Downloads, and then that will stick onto my billboard, like so.
Okay.
What does this do for us? Yes, it gives us a reference image now. So as you build your existing conditions, you have a reference from Streetmix of how to do that, okay? Notice how the sidewalk lines up where the sidewalk is, the drive lane is lining up. You want to build your SketchUp model and coordinate your Streetmix image so that you can paste that in and create it as a reference image. So now, this is a reminder that we have diagonal parking here. And what I can do then is grab the measuring tool. The measuring tool has two powerful tools embedded into it. So the measuring tool can measure line segments in SketchUp, but it also has what's called a toggle. What is a toggle? Option equals toggle create guides. That's for the Mac. In Windows, what does it say? Okay, so the measuring tool can do two things. For Windows, it's Control.
Okay, yeah.
So right now, you can see it's already doing it, but because my computer is possessed as well. So the measuring tool can do two things. It can measure line segments, but it can also create guidelines. So what I've done here is I'm pulling a guideline off. I'm going to pull a guideline of 17 feet off of that. That's going to help me remember that there's diagonal parking that's 17 feet. And then based on, I have a little bit of work here to do just in terms of getting this right. There's a 10-foot sidewalk. That's right, yeah. And then there's, yes. We're in the ballpark, at any rate. These guidelines help you create the guides necessary for the remainder of what the street can start to look like. I'm putting it on layer new stuff just so I can turn it off if necessary in the near future. And then, what I'll probably do here is zoom out a little bit. Right now there's no floor to the whole thing. What I might do is just create a floor for the whole model, right? And paint that a light gray. Just so there's a floor. Because right now there's no floor. If you download your Cad Mapper model as meshes, the streets will come in as a shape, as opposed to right now they're just lines. So again, you may prefer that just in terms of delineating the difference between street and non-street. So do try that with the Cad Mapper file, download it as a mesh, and you will see the difference between outline and mesh in terms of what that does. Some of you may prefer just to download them as center lines, that way you don't have anything you have to deal with. You can actually then create the streets exactly as you wish. But for now, this is still new stuff. I'm going to bring in a rectangle here. That's going to be now our new parking. Not new parking, but existing parking. That's the drive lane. That's the sidewalk. And I can just start modeling what is actually existing here. There's diagonal parking, so I'll start putting in the triangle for that. There's an offset tool, which is just like an AutoCAD. You can actually offset something, and you can use that to create things. You can also use the measuring tool and start to pull off a guide off of that. So here, how wide is a parking space? Typically, anywhere from 10 to 11 to 12 feet wide. So if I do that, that's a guideline now that represents 12 feet. So that would represent one parking space. I can then offset off of that, another 12 feet, that's the next parking space, etc. And then I can start putting in those lines. This is starting now to create a representation of the existing conditions of my block of Charles Street. And then you go to the 3D warehouse. Sign in with your Trimble account, which Trimble is, you're just using your EDU account for that. And you go simple car and look for something that's not horrible. There's some horrible stuff in here. Oh my God. There's a lot of, yeah. Or you can even type in a specific model name. You can get a Kia Soul. I love the Kia Soul because their advertising uses dancing hamsters. But there's a couple of models vary in the 3D warehouse in terms of their complexity. and in terms of what they are. Some of them are two-dimensional, some are three-dimensional, some have billions and billions of facets and edges, some have very few. This Kia Soul looks, yes. So this looks not too offensive, so I will download that. And when you download from the 3D Warehouse, it will ask you which version you want. Do you want 2020, 2019, 2017, depending on which version of SketchUp you're using. Some of you may elect to download the 2017 version that is free for your personal computer. So just keep in mind that when you use these computers here, you want to downsave any model that you make down to 2017. Because SketchUp Make 2017 is free. You can download that for your personal computer, totally free. So I'll download that. And then I will import that into the model. Here's a Kia Soul coming in. There it is. I'll put that in there, and then I will grab the rotate tool, which is this yin and yang Pisces thing. The rotate tool, I'll grab a corner with the protractor. I have to grab a corner with it, make a rotation axis, and then turn the car so that it's at the right angle. And then with the move tool, it's a 4-way move tool, I grab the car and move it into its parking place. Clear as mud?
You lost me at cropping them.
So there are some planters imported into the 3D Warehouse. There's some unusual ones. There's some stock ones. There's some standard ones. What's happening in the 3D Warehouse is that manufacturers are uploading their models to the warehouse so that folks will specify them. That's the whole goal of a product manufacturer, is to get an architect, a landscape architect, or a planner to specify that planter so that they, can make money. And so making these models available to the public is a great advantage to the manufacturer and allows the manufacturer as a form of advertising to get their products out there. As I mentioned, there are a wide variety of these things. Some are really quite interesting. There's a good one. Oh, 56 parking spaces. Yeah, we may need that. Woo, we may need that. I'm going to download that for sure. Oh yeah, we'll need that. That's another good hint. When you're laying out parking, use what's already been done. You could always lay out your own parking. Sometimes you have to lay out your own parking, but if and when you can use a component from the warehouse to do it and have it laid out properly, then it's always good to do that. So just browse through here. Another shortcut is to look at collections, where folks have curated collections of planters, put them together, collections of furniture, or entire catalogs that are centered around specific products. But not all of these models are created alike. Some are very photo intensive, some are very facet intensive. All these leaves, for instance, create very large models, which we don't need, because it's easier for us to bring in entourage and plants and people in Adobe rather than in the SketchUp model. If we keep our SketchUp model simple, then our processor speed will be better affected. If we bring in plants and trees and cars and people in Photoshop or Illustrator, it's much more efficient rather than using everything that's involved in the 3D Warehouse. It also gives us a little bit more of a realistic look. So here let me think. Let's try Parklet as well. There's already some Parklets that are already made. As you can see, there's already some things made here, so that could be of great advantage to us as well. Some big ones. Yeah, there's quite a few already made. So this could be a short class. No.
What's the second for that?
Parklet. So you could bring it in as a SketchUp 2019 model. It's in the downloads folder. And you can import it. Under File, Import, you could also drag and drop. It'll come in. One corner will typically have an axis, and you can drag that to your origin point. Oh, that's a big model. I don't know. For my laptop anyway, that's a big model. Because their tree, as you can see, their tree is just thousands of facets. So that could be pretty big. See that? That tree is just all these are edges and facets which do create very different situation for your processor. So if you're running a really super duper laptop or a larger CPU, that's of an advantage. But for me, also recording this lecture, that's processor speed is of a premium. But we can get this in and we'll select it, and what I'll do is explode it. So I come down to Edit Component, Explode. I can edit the component and just start deleting stuff away, or I can explode it and everything will be exploded into individual facets and edges. Ooh, well, if I do that, that could make a really big mess. But I can edit the component and see what I can do with it. Right now, it looks like everything's joined, so it looks like I do have to explode it. So I go Edit. This is a group. Again, I can edit the group, or I can explode it. All right, now I've exploded it. Now these are individual things. See, that's the box. That box is there. That plant is that. The tree is that, and I can get rid of the tree. Okay, so try that. And then hit Escape. Now I've gotten rid of the tree. Now I can bring this parklet together and rotate it and put it around our person. Rotate. To rotate, we grab a face, typically an edge, and then I rotate it around this axis to 90 degrees. Then I can move the entire group. I'll grab the Move tool, grab a corner, bring it over to her. She's now standing in it. That's okay. I'll grab her and move her into the parklet carefully. She's now standing in the parklet. Okay, these plants are not native Indiana. That's probably obvious. So I will explode the model again, and that will start to pull apart these different components. Let me try it again as exploding the group. So under Edit Group, Explode. Now those are individual components, and I can start deleting away the non-Indiana tropical broadleaf plants that are probably not typical. But that is how you can bring in a complex component, bring it into your model, and start to customize it. You need to bring it in and potentially explode it. Either explode the component under Edit Component Explode, or under Edit Group Explode. And you could start customizing the model. Under Ball State Box, you log into your Ball State Box account. It's cloud storage. Oh, that's right, we've been submitting under that. My sophomores, I have to remind them that they have cloud storage. But under 605 Submissions and Resources, in the Resources folder, I have a number of things here for us. So there are SketchUp models and components, readings, links, templates, cutouts, backgrounds, and foregrounds. The cutouts we'll use for Photoshop, backgrounds and foregrounds for Photoshop. There are some models and components in here. There is a simple tree that works really well. Somewhere in this mess. It is a SKP file. download that. That's under SketchUp Models and Components. I've got a number of buildings brought in here, apartment buildings, duplexes, ranch houses we'll be using later on. This is a simple SketchUp tree, and I will bring that in, import that as a component from my downloads folder. And I'll put this tree probably to the side like that. Now I'll zoom extents, and that's get a look at what the tree does. Now as I move the camera around, the tree follows the camera. Ooh, that's not creepy enough, is it? Like, I'm ready for my close-up. Mr. DeMille, I'm ready for my close-up. That's from Sunset Boulevard. It's fantastic. But this is typical behavior of a two-dimensional SketchUp component from the 3D warehouse. When you look at trees and furniture and people in 3D warehouse, it will tell you if it's a 3D component or a 2D component. If it's a 2D component, it is typically an image that has been altered and placed on a transparent plane, as you can see. When you place a 2D component, it will follow the camera to an extent, right? See, if we're above it now, it will still kind of show up. So this could work for a 3/4 view or an isometric view. So if I go to camera, standard view, ISO, it would work for that, right? But it doesn't work in plan view because what happens to it? It becomes flat Stanley. So these SketchUp two-dimensional components work really well for a lot of different camera views, but not for plan. So the first thing we need to decide is, are we using trees or people in this, or are we going to use all Photoshop trees and people? Those are decisions we need to make. But as we're building the model, if we're presenting the model quickly, we might start to demarc a series of trees or people in the SketchUp model for quick export. But this one is one that we've used for a number of years, and it just works really well, and it's very, very good on RAM, and it doesn't have a lot of facets or things like that. So we can plan this out. And then if we can manage to keep our trees on a separate layer, we can always turn them off and then place Photoshop trees in the plan view or in the section view or in a perspective view. But for now, let's just continue building up. Let's continue building up our planter with this tree. So I'll zoom in next to the planter and start drawing some new lines. Maybe that's 10 feet. So I type in 10, single quote, that will draw a 10-foot line. I start from this endpoint, 10, single quote, represents feet, and I will close up that. Let's try the offset tool. The offset tool are these two double arcs with a red arrow. I can offset that. Let's say offset that 12 inches. 12 inches, double quote, creates 12 inches. That's a little bit of a curve there. I'll grab the push-pull tool, pull that up. Let's say a 6-inch curve, so 6 double quote creates a 6-inch curve. And then I can move the tree maybe into the middle of that, and that starts to set that up. Okay, so try out those operations, those simple tools. Make sure you have the toolbar turned on. That's another thing we need to begin. Each day we need to make sure we have our full toolbar, so we need to go to View, Tool Palettes, Large Tool Set. I think in 2019 it's View. Let's try our guidelines again. So I'll zoom out here and then start laying out a little bit of a grid. I grab my measuring tool, and then on the Mac it's the Option key. On the PC it's the Control key. Is a toggle for what the measuring tool actually does. The default for the measuring tool is that it will just measure a line segment. But if I hit the Option key, for you, the Control key, it toggles on this additional function of the measuring tool, which is to create some guidelines or to lay out grid lines. And that's really helpful for the planner, extremely helpful for the planner. So let's say I want to put a bike rack next to this parklet. I would need to space out how much space I would need for the bike rack. Bicycle is about 7 feet long, roughly. And then lay out this grid like so. You can snap grid lines to edges, which is nice. You can delete them away. Oops. Don't want to delete my tree yet. And then I'll go to the 3D warehouse and look for a bike rack. And there's some good bike racks and there's some really bad ones. The one we designed, we had customized. There's different metal companies that will do custom bike racks based on your logo. And so I did the logo for Bike Muncie, and Bike Muncie was then able to order custom bike racks with the Bike Muncie logo flashed into it. It was welded into it. It was a pretty proud moment in my life. But as a recovering architect, that's anything that gets built, it's really great. I say recovering architect because, well, planning found me. All right, I'm going to put in a little bit of brick there. So I'll grab the paint bucket, go to my materials menu. So under window, materials, look for brick cladding and siding. There are some default bricks brought in to SketchUp. You are not limited to those, but you can paint a little bit of brick right there. Most bike racks are drilled and sealed directly into concrete or stone, so you could pick that variety of things. So either that or brick, depending on what kind of siding you want or what kind of paving you wish. There's a website called Architectures where you can actually create textures and bring them into SketchUp. Architectures.org, you just say what kind of pattern. So I want a texture, it's going to be Flemish bond, it's going to be 8 rows, it's going to be 2 columns, it's going to be red sandstone color. I mean, this is pretty fancy. You can make your own texture, and then adjust the hue and tint. I can push the hue or the contrast a couple different ways. Handmade edges, joints, mortar joints, rough concrete joints. So that starts to look more like a paving brick. Recessed joints. Download the texture as a texture map, JPEG. You can do a small resolution with this free account. You can get a pro account and actually do larger. So I'll download that texture. Allow the download. That's now in the downloads folder. I then can import that texture, I think. I remember now how to do it. That would help if I remembered how. Materials. Go to home, colors and model. Import. So there's a way to bring in that new texture. I'm not recalling it at this second, but where you can bring in that new texture and bring it into your materials menu and use that and start to paint that right onto the surface. For now, I'm just going to stick with this. But just know that there is this ability to create new textures from this sliding scale and bring them directly into the SketchUp model. All right, I got sidetracked. I was looking for a bike rack. I brought it in. I'll import that from my downloads folder. There it is. Set that there. Grab one edge with the rotate tool. I'll grab a corner, extend a rotating edge, turn it now 90 degrees. Grab the whole thing again with the move tool. Grab one corner, set it there on the brick. Look at it, make sure it's sitting on the ground. All right. So that's starting to take shape now. The tree is sitting in nothing at the moment. It probably needs to sit in mulch or something dark. Probably not brick. But it needs to be setting in a texture of some kind. Again, I can go back to my materials textures, find under landscaping, fencing and vegetation, probably some cultured stone or mulch for the tree to be sitting into. You can put a fence around the tree so that dogs won't, you could put a fence around that tree. I can grab a rectangle and set that up like so. Let's say 16 inches up. Oops. Grab that rectangle. I can make a little fence around this tree, just like in New York, where they're all fenced, but the dogs still, do their thing anyway. If you're talking on your phone in New York and you trip over one of these, that's. But you can pick a fence then. You can paint the fence directly onto it, which is kind of cool, because then we can see through it. Makes fencing really fast. If you've got an outdoor walkout terrace or something like that, you can just paint this fence pattern onto something. So it's a real time saver. I need to probably offset this back in. I'll grab the offset tool, offset that in like so. Paint that again, a different landscape texture. That looks better. So now we have a fence, as we joke, we have a fence around the trees so the trees don't escape. Urban planner humor. That was something my mentor used to say. There are things we can change here. If we don't like certain parts of this, there's a privacy screen that is a certain color. Looks like it's painted a certain way. We can continue to customize those things. We can pick a weathered wood color instead. Paint those. So they're kind of like that silver cedar color versus this dark walnut. Japanese charcoal finishes are the hot thing right now. You'll notice that they'll take cedar and charcoal it or burn it so that it actually builds up a protective charcoal exterior. It's a Japanese timber technique, but it's the hot thing in residential design right now. You'll see that a lot. But this looks more like a cedar box, just a weathered cedar or weathered redwood box. We need another plant probably to come in. So let's go back to the warehouse and look for simple grasses. Simple is an operative word. Some of these are horrible, but you gotta navigate through. Oh my goodness, what is that? Yeah. Goodness sakes. I'll try prairie grasses. That might work. I'll go import. So drop seed grass. I'll scale it up. I'll grab this scale tool. You'll see it's got all these different points and vertices. The scale tool allows you to stretch something like this and stretch something like this. That can be quite useful. Click it again, and then I can move it into place. Place it into the box. To move it up, I grab the object first. I force it into the Z-axis by hitting the up key. The up key on your arrow keys forces a SketchUp object into an axis. Try it. With the up key, it'll go up and down on the Z-axis. With the left key, it'll go on the Y-axis. With the right key, it'll go on the X. That is an incredible time saver if you're moving stuff into place. I do need to get you that SketchUp reference card. I think SketchUp quick reference card. So the quick reference card, just down, there's a, for version 2019, each one is different. Yeah, that's right. You need to download the version 2019. They look like this. They're really helpful quick reference cards for all of the different commands. There's one on Pinterest, but I need to get the ones for you that are all of the. No, I don't want to log into Pinterest. Oh my goodness. There are quick references and keyboard shortcuts that are helpful for 2019, version 2019. So we'll get you those. They're very helpful for that. But those are some of the. I'm just going to keep sharing with you the shortcuts that I use. All right. More editing. Let's get in here. And let's make this thing match. So based on concrete, I'll paint these concrete, different concrete color from my materials menu, get these to match. I'm not sure why they weren't matching, but they are now. This planter box is annoying me, so I'll get it out of the way. It also is preventing a wheelchair from getting in. So carefully, we need to eliminate something that's been exploded. We need to carefully delete away each little piece of stuff. Maybe move this grass out of the way to there. And this is where things can get tricky, so you want to be careful in here. When we select things from the left, it selects everything that is contained in the bounding box. When we select things from the right, it will select everything that it is actually touching. So we want to be careful that we don't delete away more things than we intended. If SketchUp has a weakness, it's probably here, in the sense that things can get very, very tricky when you start deleting stuff. There is a joy in having things be pre-made and available to us in the warehouse. There is a lack in that some of those things can be quite sticky or quite annoying when you start to try to edit them. Not to despair, though, because things are easily repaired. SketchUp will start closing stuff up very quickly once you start to rejoin different edges and things. See what I got here. I have a little bit of a mess, but it's a beautiful mess. a little bit of a mess, but that was my choice in terms of starting to edit the component itself. I'm a mess, but they're my choices. And then I'll just get in here and start painting those, that similar concrete, and it closes up pretty well. Just get this stuff closed up. There's a little bit of a ramp. Maybe that gets painted concrete, and that's a little bit of a ramp going up. A little bit of customization there. As I showed in the examples, a lot of parklets are built on decks, so they can be moved in and out of place. So that can cause some complications for ADA. Others have ramps going up into them. Some are built right at the level of the curb, so you can actually go straight from the sidewalk into them, so that they're built just so their wheelchair can roll right into it. Every city is a little bit different just in terms of what their streetscaping is. But if we're ready, this looks like something. What I like to do then is zoom out, select everything, make everything a group. So I go edit, make group. That's all one thing now. Then I set the axes. I need to set the axes, tools, axes. I want to set the axis around one corner, because when I bring it into the next model, I want to bring in this thing as a whole component on a corner that I can control. Not a corner that's off, all right, but on a corner of the thing, because it will really affect how it brings in. It could be this corner, it could be this corner. I probably don't want it out here. I want it close to the model or snapping to the model itself. Because when you bring it into the next model, it'll bring it in on that corner. And then I set the axes there, and now the new axis for this model is set on that corner. When you bring it into the next model, it'll come in on that corner. And it brings everything together. So then I'll make this a component, edit, make component. We'll call it your parklet. We've already set the axes. There's an option here to set the component axis, create. And then I'll save this. Just to make sure, bless you. We'll give this whole thing a name. Bless you. And then I'll close that. Go back to my other model. Where's some things I wanted to change here? I want to get rid of that. And this needs a floor. So let me open up window, and then I'll make sure that the layers are open. They're called tags in version 2020. We just want to make sure those are open and that we're working on new layers. I need a new base layer, so I'll make that. I'll make a new base layer. I just need a floor for everything to sit on. Make that the active layer. And I'll make a base layer here for everything to sit on. Scale that up. And I'll just paint that white or a soft gray. Model info, when we bring in a model from Cad Mapper, it's going to be in metric, so we need to change the working units, if we haven't already. That's an important thing. And of course, I need to remember where that is. So when we forget, we just changing working units of a SketchUp model. Any question you have, someone has probably answered it. The help forms are tremendous. So window model info. Go to window, model info, and I'm going to change the working units from decimal to architectural, and it will change everything to imperial units. Any Cad Mapper model you download is going to be in metric, so you want to change the working units there. This new floor, it's right now, luckily all the buildings are their own thing. I chose the outline version for the streets as opposed to a mesh. That is a different way of thinking. I encourage you to try the mesh version because it comes a surface that you can paint in here in SketchUp. So the Cad Mapper options are definitely things to be investigated in terms of the width of the streets and in terms of whether or not they are meshes or outlines. You can see the setbacks of these lots are a little bit wonky. You might want to precisely measure your street widths and input those into Cad Mapper when you make the model. That will make this look a little bit more easier to tolerate. But at any rate, for the purpose of this demonstration, we'll just get in here now to our context. And I'm going to import my new parklet. So import. I want to make a new layer first. Just make sure my new stuff is on new layers, not existing layers. Import that parklet. And you can see it brings it in on that same corner, so I can snap it to the street. And it comes in like so. It brings in its guidelines as well, so that may be a good thing, maybe a bad thing. I can right mouse click and I can look at the entity info. It's right now, I have it on the parklets layer. So every instance of this component will be coming in on the parklets layer, which means I can turn off that layer at any time. Component and model, I can edit the component. So that's really good because now I realize I don't need those guidelines everywhere, so I want to get rid of those. I can edit the component in the new model and it will save that instance of the component. I can place the component again. If I copy and paste it now, it will paste it as a secondary component. It won't, it should anyway. If not, you just import it again. Component one in model. I can change the axes. I can send it to the 3D warehouse. There's lots of things I can do. But I can edit the component in the new model. Copy, paste. So here's a second version of it. I'll snap that to there. See the advantage of building the stuff separately and then bringing it in? Do we understand that advantage conceptually from our workflow standpoint? If we were to do all this in the master model, things could get really wonky and really sticky. If you do things outside of the model and bring them in, there's a time saver and I think an efficiency to it when you're working with really small stuff. Where was I? Paste. Come on, there we go. Now I'll snap it here to the sidewalk. hopefully. All right, here's another really cool thing. So I've got 3 instances of this thing. It could be a tree, it could be a parklet. I'll click on this, I'll do a right mouse click and then do edit component, and I'll change something about it, okay? I'll change something. Let me get in, just repeating myself now. It will change every instance of that component in the model. So let's say I want to edit this, edit component. Let's say I wanted to delete the scale figure. She will be deleted from every instance of the component placed in the model. Let's say I want to change the bike rack. It will change every instance of that in the model. Let's say I want to change the outward face of this. It will change every instance of that in the model. So once you bring in a component, it can be edited and customized for your master model, and it'll update every instance of that. How is that an advantage to us? On a large master plan, you could bring in 50 houses that are all the same model. You do one change to one instance of them, it updates all of them. You bring in 5 apartment buildings, you add a turret or an entrance to one, it updates all of them. You don't want it to do that. If you don't want it to do that, you click on the component and then you make it unique. There's an option here to make it unique. If I can get that right, edit, component. There's an option to make this particular component unique, and it will isolate it from the other ones, right there. See, under edit component, you can actually make that component unique. So let's say this parklet has something different to it. You can make that unique, and now it isolates it from the other components. Yes?
So like in the apartment example, so like let's say you have 50 apartment buildings, you want to make every third one have a turret.
Yes.
Can you do that, like make a
Make that
set of them
unique.
unique that way?
Make it a new component. Copy and paste it. So these are the conceptual things I want to impart on you in terms of your workflow. Other folks, when they pick up SketchUp, they just build a model and everything's on the same layer and everything gets sticky and you try to move it and it takes things with it. It just gets a huge mess. If you build things outside of this model and bring it in later, it gives you some versatility. It also allows you to use the same model for the proposed and for the existing. So there's some advantages to this. By isolating things as components, by isolating things on their own layers, you turn on those layers on and off, you can toggle between an existing condition and a proposed condition. You also can bring in cars and people on their own layer, then turn them off when you get ready to export that into Photoshop. Those kinds of things. So let's say I wanted to change that tree. Well, right now it's part of a component, but if I were to edit that component, change out the tree, it would update every instance of that component. So those are some things to think about in terms of our workflow, in terms of the advantage or disadvantage of using components. So let's get down to earth and let's take a look at this. So on the large toolbar is a position camera tool. It's a little person. Have them stand down here, and then we'll look around. And then there's the walk around. We'll just go for a little walk. Whoops. Oop, that didn't work. Zoom out. And we'll go for a little walk. Walk by our new parklet. We can turn on the shadows like we did. The shadows. Those show up on your right-hand column. They're floating menus on mine. So we'll put on, but they're in drop-down menus on your right-hand column. So I'll turn on the fog. Just, it kind of fades, makes edges fade and stuff like that. Shadows, where are my shadows? Say what?
This is Silent Hill.
Yes. There's a great song called Welcome to My Fog. Where are my shadows?
I put you in the top there.
Yeah. There. Okay. There they are. All right. Trying to get my shadows menu. It's minimized, so that's why it's hiding from me right now. Oh, it's minimized. Let me do this trick. Oh. There. Oh, shadow settings. Here we are. Okay, there we go. Okay, so time of day, time of year.
So it even gives a shadow to the two-dimensional tree.
You can see it casting under the ground. There it is. Right? Or no? It's not. Okay. It's definitely not. All right, so that's annoying. So what we'll do is we will edit the component. Get rid of the tree. Gets rid of every tree. Set this, get this going. And then I've got flying grass. Look at that, flying grass. Fantastic. Get rid of that. Goodbye, flying grass. All right. Then I'll open up the styles menu and take a look at some of the different styles that we have. Default. There's the simple, there's the X-ray, there's the hidden line, there's the shaded, there's shaded with textures, another X-ray where you can see through the buildings, simple, shaded with textures is pretty good. And we go into color sets, you can look at it through one of these color sets. This is called colorblind. All the lines become white. Everything else becomes black. It's a very abstract style. There's some interesting color sets with these teal. That's pretty hot. But if you're going for a more abstract vision or more abstract notion as opposed to something more photorealistic, these color sets can be quite fun. And in urban planning, the less precise you are with some things, the less details your public will get obsessed about. Yes, but architectural rendering is entering what's called a post-digital phase, meaning the trend towards photorealism is moving away from photorealism into more abstraction, because clients were getting too wrapped up in the photorealistic notions and decisions. Abstraction actually helps the client because then they don't get married to an idea or they don't become obsessed with a very particular paint or trim color. You're just presenting a vision. And that there's an argument perhaps to have some abstraction be part of that. Let's see what else. There's some assorted. There's some nice ones here. They makes it look like a watercolor. You can make this look like architectural blueprints, but sometimes the edges are a little bit weird. Now we're in the matrix. I've taken the blue pill. This is more. This is called Scribble on Masonite. Gives it the whole view of a texture that's interesting. So play around with those styles. And just know that all of these styles can be edited. There are people who spend hours doing this. They edit the styles and they make it their own, or they have a certain way of doing things where the lines become extended and look like sketchy edges. There's a sketchy edges menu here. These things are virtually unreadable, but blah, looks like a chalkboard. Okay, but they do become very difficult to read. They're fun, but they work better for furniture and for woodworking and for small objects as opposed to urban landscapes. Let's go back to the default styles. I've been using shaded with textures for the most part, but these color sets do look interesting. I'm curious. Something warmer like this could be interesting. Makes me think of mornings in Muncie on Charles Street now that Caffeinery is reopened. That's hot. That is great. Oh man. That maroon, oh man, that's really something. But this might be something here. I'm starting to fall in love with this. So the context buildings read as a monolith, and the parklet reads sort of in the foreground. So I'll get this ready for export now. I want to turn off, under view, I want to turn off all of my guides. Those guidelines will all go. I'll turn off the axes. We haven't made any section cuts yet, but in this case, but we're probably looking primarily at this here. And then I'll get ready to export a two-dimensional graphic. I'll select a PNG and then click on Options. So I want to give this a name. This is going to be Charles Street Parklets looking west. Put that in appropriate folder. I'm going to select a PNG, Options, and then we need to tell it how big to make this image. The view size is going to be the default of your monitor, which is 1659 by 767 for me. It needs to be bigger than that, so I want to push this thing to like 6,000 pixels. And then there's a line scale multiplier. So all the lines that are in our components have a thickness to them, and usually it's too thick. So I'm gonna bump this down to 0.5. What it'll do is is all the lines that are on our edges will be thinner as opposed to thicker when we make the export. Anti-aliasing is a smoothing of diagonal lines and curves. Transparent background, if we don't want that tan Luke Skywalker sky, then it will eliminate that from the rendering. And I'll click OK. And then get ready for export.
When you export it, you're only taking the image.
Just the image, not the model, just the image that we've made here.
And when you say transparent background and then save this as a PNG, then you're making it sticker.
Correct, because that sky will disappear and that will be completely transparent. We can bring in our own sky or our own context. So if we have a context photograph, we can bring that in, or our own sky. Yeah. I've already turned off the trees, so we'll use Photoshop trees instead, and Photoshop people.
So if you had like a Google Street View standing in the same spot,
You got it. You can set, yes. You got it.
and then connecting to that.
Yes. Well done. Yep. So if you have a Google Street View, you could bring that in. Yes. Yep. Yep. Okay, so we go to Photoshop now. Close out SketchUp. I'll save that model as something. Parklet Fun. Here's what we did yesterday in 261. Collaged it together. So bringing in a sky, bringing in trees, bringing in people. That's what we did yesterday. So we open this new thing. I put in the downloads folder. Charles Street Parklet looking west. It's 6,000 pixels wide. As you can see, the sky is gone. It's not part of that at all. So that said, we go to our resources folder. I'm going to close out SketchUp to save RAM. Hello. I'll say box. I bought a set of clip art from Thailand. So there are skies, foregrounds, fields, cut out people, cut out cars. They're all uploaded.
Yeah, oh, okay.
All those are in a resource folder. So I go to cutouts. There's cars, diagramming elements, trees, people in plan view, in people. The cars, I've got some cars in elevation view for sections, and I've got cars in plan view for plan. So any type of view that you shoot from SketchUp, whether it be a plan or a section or a perspective, we're building a library of cars and people that will work for each of those drawings. Trees, there's a great variety of trees. I was quite happy with this set. So for $35, I was able to get, 2,000 things, as opposed to looking for everything and downloading it. One big pack is helpful. So I look at the trees that are in this, and I'd start downloading them. So maybe this one, that goes to the downloads folder. There's 4 pages of trees, so just flip through here and find trees that are appropriate for the street. There's some wonderful street tree manuals and guides. Purdue has one, Pittsburgh has one. Just starting to get familiar with different tree species that are appropriate for urban landscapes.
So this is all two-dimensional.
These are all two-dimensional, and they are all PNGs, so they are transparent. Their transparency is preserved around it. And then we get some people. Let's go to resources, cutouts. I've listed a few people in plan view, people cutout, and then there are vector line people, there are summer people, and then there are autumnal people. There's a whole folder of people in autumn, so they're dressed for the season. Most of the people are walking away from the viewer. That's typical because then the photographer doesn't get sued. One of the websites that was featuring free cutouts had a cutout of Matthew McConaughey, and Matthew McConaughey sued. He was not all right with it. So I like that. Yeah. You've been a great audience. Thank you. Yeah. There are other websites called Skalgubar that have all Swedish people. There's another website called Non-Scandinavia, which has non-Swedish people. Not kidding. This is people use these. People use these cutouts all the time, and you start recognizing the same cutout in different architectural renderings. It's hilarious how that's gotten. But because when Skalgubar was there's an architect. Oh, there we go. So when you go to skalgubar.com, it's primarily Swedish folks. Oh gosh, what is this? No. Just use, yeah. But there's one called nonscandinavia.com that has more ethnically diverse folks, as opposed to all of the white folks that live in Sweden. So it just was becoming a problem because the free cutout, Swedish, the free cutout websites were making it too easy for people to use people that were not ethnically diverse, and so therefore the more websites had to be started. So this is now on its own layer. It's we need a sky. That's right. We need to get a sky. So if we go to resources, backgrounds. There's fields and skies. Let me go to list view. So there's 4 sets from the pack that I bought from Thailand. Some of them are really dramatic. That's very heroic. Okay, it's a nice sky, but it's somewhat heroic. There are also photos that I've taken just right at Canon Commons. So my advice, go to Canon Commons or go to a park and just shoot some grass, shoot some brick paving, shoot a sky, it's perfect because there's not a lot of tree cover there, and so you can get some brilliant grasses or skies to use as foreground. So here's the brick paving there, right there at Cannon Commons. I'll download that. This is one of the skies at Cannon Commons. I'll download that. And if we need some grass for a median or for foreground, you can download that. So start taking pictures of things that you can start to use in renderings. It's becomes part of your personal library, and you can even start to build up some of these things together. So that's on its own layer. So I will bring in a sky. We'll call it sky. I'll place that new sky in the background.
Could make the grass the sky.
Could. Okay. I'll change the opacity. I'll shift that all the way down. I'll send that down so the sky is not overwhelming things. I'll put it underneath. I'll tuck it underneath. I'll make another layer. We'll just call it trees. Start placing some of those trees in foreground and in background elements. Woo! Move that to the front. Move that tree to the front. Hello. Hello. Scale that up. Create more of a foreground situation. I'll shift that opacity down. And maybe on that layer, I'll change its blending options. I'll do a right mouse click, blending options. I'll do blend mode, multiply. What that will do is it will layer the tree as if it were transparent over the context as opposed to covering it up. It's a different type of effect, for inserting a person or a tree into your rendering so that it doesn't actually cover up things. It actually is layering them onto things. I'll copy that, start pasting a couple of these in. Grab the shift key, start moving that tree into place. Try to insert it into the parklet. See, we never know. There it is. Never knew that it wasn't a SketchUp tree. Because we're tricky like that. Paste it again. This time I'm going to flip it. I'm not going to rotate it or flip it. Actually, transform. Flip horizontal. Now the tree is facing the other way. You never know that it's the same tree. Ha ha. Ha ha. Send that into the background. Make it smaller. Now it's back there. I may need to trim off the base of the trunk so it doesn't cover other stuff up. I can also change its opacity, make things fade into the background as they get further away. Brick, maybe there's some brick. I'll make a foreground element. I'll open up that brick. And just start collaging this stuff in here. Maybe I'll just flip that. Flip horizontal. Put this in here, like so, and maybe cut it away. So it's a smart object right now. I right mouse click, I rasterize the layer, and then I can cut away part of it and create it, make it work in our perspective a little more, like this. Cut away part of it like this. Select inverse, and it cuts away that portion of the brick that I don't want. It's still an object, so I can transform it. I can skew it. I can push its perspective, like this. Oh. Accept it. Image transform skew. I can push it real good. That starts to become a surface or a foreground surface. What else can I do? Can I bring it in again, maybe? That becomes more of a foreground element. Skew this like that. Now it looks like, see that? Simple, keeping it simple. Oh, okay. Just keeping it simple. Gotta keep things skewed. There, that's better. That's looking a little better. All right, let's bring in some people. So here's our Swedish lady. We need to recognize our horizon line. So our horizon line is right about there. It's what everything's vanishing to. So if she is at eye level with us, then her eye level needs to be right in that general vicinity. She can't be up here or down here. This was an eye level perspective generated from the SketchUp model, not from Google Earth, Street View, or otherwise. So here she is taking a picture of Charles Street. She can be really close to you, provided that she's at eye level with you. We can follow a compositional rule of thirds, which we are. One of my friends says, Lauren can't help it. Everything he does is rule of thirds. And then we can keep placing. We had a couple of people in here. She needs to be up front in the layer order. She's heading off to a client meeting. We can change her opacity. We can change their opacity. We can, sometimes we don't want our client to focus on the people, so I'll put a blur on them. It's true. It makes them look like they're in motion, but it creates less focus on the people and more on the context. Again, we don't want folks to obsess over these things. So sometimes we'll blur the people, sometimes we'll just use their silhouettes when we don't want people to obsess over these details. Okay, is that starting to look like something? Okay. Something. I need a little bit of asphalt in my life, just a little bit of asphalt. So I can just make a lasso and then get in a soft gray. Maybe this is a reconfiguration of the street. I don't know. We'll just paint that a soft gray. Just a little bit there. And that's a new asphalt layer. I'll just change the opacity down. And we need a car. So, need a car. There's a car in here.
So why don't you do all of that in SketchUp before you, why not just get the ground how you want it to look with the sidewalk and the streets and everything, and then bring it to Photoshop?
It doesn't work very well. The SketchUp textures get very grainy, and you can't see them well anyway. You have less control over them, and they take time.
Okay.
SketchUp people look like plastic figures. SketchUp cars look like toys. SketchUp trees have billions of facets in this little computer. So if you're extra judicious about those things in terms of efficiencies, you can save all that and do all this in Photoshop as opposed to placing all of those elements in SketchUp. If you keep your SketchUp model efficient to generate these views, then it allows your computer to run faster.
Okay.
This is all part of a thinking behind the SketchUp model, primarily generated with the thought or the idea that the SketchUp models look like plastic. Well, to make it look less plasticky, we'll use the SketchUp model for this much, we'll use Photoshop for the rest. So it is a philosophy behind that, in terms of how much SketchUp stuff we use versus how much Photoshop we use. And over the past few years, I've been moving more and more to using Photoshop cars in plan, Photoshop cars in section, because the SketchUp cars are so bad, or they're out of date, or they look like toys. Whereas you can download a nice photo of an existing car, bring it in, and people will recognize it as an existing car. So that's sort of the thinking behind that. And every time you bring in a SketchUp component, it has billions of facets and lines, and so it has an effect on the model itself. By the way, we need more cars. I don't think we have enough cars yet, but this one, yeah, exactly. So yeah, you're right. So let's get a better car. I've got cars going away from us. I've got cars coming towards us. So that's good. Because Charles Street, yeah, nice Mercedes. There we go. Got to have a nice German Mercedes. There's a few. There's a few. Bring him in. At eye level, we are at level with the car's roof, right? Yes? Is that right? So, and then opacity down. Okay. Is that looking like something? All right. How much time do we have? None. Okay. So shadows, we can paint shadows into this. Okay, and just for a little bit, I can show you that quickly next class. But that's a workflow to where you can efficiently bring in changes to the context model, shoot a view to context model, use the styles to export it as an interesting look, take it into Photoshop and begin to polish it. When you save it now, we save it as a Photoshop file because it'll save all of the layers together. You want to save a Photoshop file that has all the layers intact. And then you can save a copy of that. If you save a copy of this as a PNG, it'll preserve the transparency of the sky, and you can place it onto a color or a slide. If you save it as a JPEG, it will flatten everything in its current configuration and give you a flattened image. So let's see what where to go. Save as. Always know where it goes, right? Always got to remember where it goes. It's in the downloads folder. Okay, very good. Very good, Lauren. Big Finish. You've been a great audience. Ta-da! Okay, so there it is. Okay? So, efficient use of doing some things outside of your master plan, bringing them into the master plan, shooting a camera view, collaging it up. That's a workflow that I hope you enjoy doing, because it's going to allow you to generate proposals very, very quickly. Yeah, yes.
I had trouble with the shadow settings that you have. I just don't remember anything about them really exist.
Always say, I don't need.
October So UTC minus 4, or minus 5. Yes.
Okay, there we go.
So you were in Russia in October, and the sun had already set at 5. Because UTC plus 5 is 5 hours east of London. We are in UTC minus 4 minus 5, which is 5 hours west of London. UTC is Greenwich.
And then the image that you ended up bringing from Photoshop didn't
Yep.
have these, like the guidelines on the street any longer?
It did.
Or did they?
It did,
Okay,
yeah.
so this in essence was what you put in
Yes.
there, but you stylized it with the.
Correct.
Okay.
That's not it. But these were still visible. You can see, barely see them in front of me.
Okay. Thank you.
Thanks. Hi, Sing Lim.